What do you need to watch for when buying a car from a dealer? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. Now, as many of you know, I'm a consultant, and I help consumers negotiate their deals as part of the nonprofit organization that I work with. And for this video, I'm going to show you examples of horrible dealer contracts that my clients shared with me that show you what not to do unless you want to pour thousands of dollars down the drain. And later, I'm also going to show you an example of a proper dealer price quote which I prepared for one of my clients that shows you what a fair deal should look like and potentially even the best deal that you can get. And before getting into it, a huge thanks to OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator, for sponsoring a portion of this video. So let's start off with an example of what not to do with a dealer contract where the consumer is clearly overpaying. So here we have an example of a contract for a brand new 2024 Kia Forte, which one of my clients shared with me. Now, this is a pretty typical example of what a dealer price quote or contract could potentially look like. And we can see that in this area here, the payment options are clearly highlighted and are designed to grab your attention because oftentimes that's what the dealership wants you to focus on, your payments and not much else. So you may think that a payment of $211 bi-weekly is somewhat reasonable because that's what the dealership has highlighted. But it's not until you look at the price breakdown, which is in smaller font over here on the right side, where we really start to see some major issues. We can see the vehicle price, or MSRP, is $28,095, and just below that we have a mandatory freight or delivery charge of $1,750, which is taken straight from the manufacturer website, and that's perfectly fine. But then below that we have our fees, which total $5,876, which is close to 20% of the price of the vehicle. Now, why is that the case? Well, that's because when we take a look at the fees breakdown, we can see that the dealership is charging a number of add-ons, including what they call a Plaza Protection Package, which is $3,399. We have a top-up warranty that's $899. We have an administration fee, otherwise known as a doc fee, for $599. And then we have pre-delivery expenses, which are $599. And below that, we have a $380 charge for a few small fees and a color charge from the manufacturer website, which are all perfectly legitimate. But as for the rest of these charges, well, these are nothing but dealer add-ons that should be optional, but the dealership is making mandatory simply to inflate the price of the vehicle and make additional profit. They're adding next to no value to the vehicle, and the consumer is really not getting much of anything for this money that they're spending. Now, some of you might be saying, why doesn't the consumer just tell the dealership that they're not interested and negotiate all these charges out of the deal? Well, in this particular case, the dealership did not give them that option. They told them this is the price, take it or leave it. There was no ability to purchase the vehicle without also purchasing all these add-on products. And that's a practice that's known as tied selling, because the dealership is tying the price of the vehicle to the purchase of additional products. It's a totally unprofessional practice that should not be happening. And because this consumer is paying an additional $5,500 worth of add-ons, that's increasing the bi-weekly payments by a significant amount, which is something that the average consumer might not be aware of if they're only looking at payments and not paying attention to the total price and the price breakdown. Now, let's take a look at another price quote for the exact same vehicle, which I prepared for this client, which shows an actual fair price that they should be paying in the first place. So this is what we call an invoice price quote report, which is something that we prepare for anyone that signs up for our service. So if we go to the last page, you can see the price breakdown for the vehicle. Now, the left column here is the MSRP column, which is the price that the consumer pays for this vehicle. You can see that this vehicle has an MSRP of $28,195, which is taken straight from the manufacturer website. And below that, we have our mandatory fees, again, from the manufacturer website, including a color charge of $250, our freight and PDI or destination and delivery fee of $18.50, and we have a few small mandatory fees such as AC tax, tire tax, and here in Ontario an OMVIC fee. Now below our mandatory fees, we do have an administration or dock fee, which in this case was $5.99. However, we were able to negotiate that out of the total price, which is why it's shown as a discount for $5.99 for the same amount. And below our discount, we have our rebate, which is taken from the manufacturer website, which in this case, the buyer was entitled to. It was a $500 grad rebate taken off the total price. And that just leaves us with our pre-tax total and then our taxes, which brings us our out-the-door price here at the bottom. Now, something additional that we do for our service is that we also include this invoice column, which is basically the invoice price, otherwise known as the dealer cost, which is designed to show the consumer how much the dealer pays for the vehicle, so they know how much profit the dealership is making. In this case, the invoice price is $26,249, which is just under $2,000 lower than the MSRP, which means that at full price, this dealership is making around $2,000 profit on the deal. Now we basically share this information in the price quote so that some consumers may want to negotiate a better price, knowing how much profit the dealership makes. In this case, because the dealership has around a $2,000 profit margin, if the consumer were to negotiate, say, a $1,000 additional discount, well, that would be considered a fair, reasonable deal because the consumer is getting a good discount and getting a fair price, but the dealership is still making a little bit of money as well. This is what a fair, reasonable deal should look like. Just the basic MSRP mandatory fees all straight from the manufacturer website, plus your rebates and a negotiated dealer discount. There's no add-ons, no junk fees, and no mandatory products that the dealership is forcing you to buy like there were in the other example. And because this consumer is now paying a fair, reasonable price, this is also going to help lower their payments if they decide to finance or lease. Now, of course, I do have additional examples of some pretty outrageous dealer contracts to share with you in just a moment. But before we get to them, it's important to understand that you do have protections and consumer buying rights anytime you buy a vehicle from a dealership. For example, here in Ontario, dealers are regulated by OMVIC and are required to follow certain rules under the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act. These rules require dealers to advertise vehicles with an all-in price. They're also required to make certain disclosures about a vehicle's past use and history, including any serious collisions. If you encounter a dealership that's breaking any of these rules, make sure that you report them to OMVIC because they could be investigated and even face penalties. But it's important to understand that you can only take advantage of these consumer protections when you buy a vehicle from an OMVIC registered dealer. To learn more about your consumer protections and to access free car buying resources, just visit the OMVIC website. More information can be found in the description below. Okay, now getting back to the contracts, let's take a look at a few more examples of what not to do when shopping for a vehicle. So here's a pretty outrageous one. If we take a look at the price breakdown, once again just below the vehicle MSRP, we can see a number of mandatory add-on products which the dealership has added to the price of the vehicle, including a rust module for $2,499, road hazard plus for $2,399, a 2-year prepaid package for $425, and then we also have anti-theft etching for $499 and an 84-month extended warranty plan for $3,375. Again, in this particular example, all of these were mandatory products which the dealership automatically included on the vehicle with no option to remove them. It was either take it or leave it, or just walk out the door and buy a car elsewhere, which is what I hope this consumer did in the end. In this example, it's a little bit less outrageous. We have an MSRP of $25,999, and then we have nitrogen for $199, a ridiculous charge that's adding absolutely no value whatsoever. We have wheel locks for $199. Again, overinflated because wheel locks can be purchased almost anywhere for a far, far lower price. And then on the other side of the contract, we also have our admin fee for $599. And below that, we have a 3-year platinum protection package for $999, altogether totaling around $2,000 or close to 10% of this vehicle's MSRP. And not all of these contracts are cash deals or financing deals. We can see the exact same thing happening on lease agreements as well. Here's an example of a lease agreement where if we look at the price breakdown, we can see the dealership is charging $985 for a customer care package, $299 for wheel locks, and over $1,000 for rust undercoating. Altogether, nearly adding $2,500 to the price of the vehicle. And again, all these products were just automatically included onto the price without the consumer even being aware and without any option to remove them. And here's an example of another dealer contract where if we look at the price breakdown, we can see that this consumer was charged $799 for something called Secure Ride. There were a number of additional products which the dealership tried to charge, but the consumer was successful in removing them, which is why we can see zero charge for all of them. And the result is that we have a total price after tax of just over $60,400. Now let's compare that to the price that I negotiated for this consumer for the exact same vehicle with a different dealership. So here we go. Here's the price quote report for the exact same vehicle which I negotiated, and we can see in the price breakdown we have all the mandatory charges with no add-ons, no additional products, plus we have an additional dealer discount which we negotiated into the price, and we also have a Honda rebate of an additional $1,500 which was not included on the other quote, which means that altogether with all the discounts we're saving over $3,000 off the regular MSRP, which is just over $1,200 over dealer cost when we compare it against the invoice price column. And on top of that, we're not paying for any dealer add-ons or unnecessary charges, which means that when compared to the other price quote, we're actually saving around $4,000 after tax, which of course is a substantial amount of money. So what exactly is the takeaway here? Well, the major takeaway is that you need to carefully read the contract and look over all the information and read everything very carefully before you sign any deal. And always check the car manufacturer website to get an idea of what the baseline price that you should be paying is, with the real MSRP and all the mandatory charges without any dealer add-ons or additional products. It's also here on the manufacturer website where you can learn about any additional manufacturer incentives or rebates which you should be entitled to. And once you've calculated the total price, you can then see whether it's possible to negotiate any additional discount with the dealership, which may be possible on certain vehicles, especially if they're available in stock on the dealership lot. And remember, only after you've read the contract very carefully and you're happy with everything that you see written down, only then should you sign. Because in many locations, including right here in Ontario, once you sign that contract, the deal is done. There is no cancellation or cooling off period whatsoever. Now, some of you are wondering how on earth is it possible that so many dealerships can still get away with using some of these selling tactics, including tide selling? Well, there has been a lot of activity to do something about it, including in the United States with the Federal Trade Commission, where they introduced a proposal to ban certain dealership practices, including the use of junk fees or forcing consumers to pay for products that they're not interested in. Unfortunately, however, there was very heavy pushback from the dealership lobby, including dealership associations, which pretty much postponed or even put a stop to all of these proposals. And we've even seen very similar activity in Canada, including right here in Ontario, where the Ontario government introduced a proposal to update the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act and increase consumer protection, including some proposals which my organization advocated for, including a ban on tide selling and even introducing a potential cooling off period on vehicle contracts. Unfortunately, however, there was very significant pushback from the dealer associations right here as well, to the point where the government announced that they would not be moving forward on the proposal of introducing a cooling off period on contracts, which for us was a major disappointment to hear. Now, if you want to share what you think about this and what the government should be doing to help protect consumers everywhere, make sure you write to them so that they can hear how you feel. In addition to consumer advocates such as myself, consumer voice is extremely important for them to hear. So make sure you write to your local authorities if you want to see consumer protection increased. Otherwise, we might just continue to see issues happening like this for a long time. So let me know if you found this video helpful, and if you have any similar stories or examples to share, make sure you send them to me and maybe I might include them for a future video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also take a look at my other videos by clicking these links over here. Make sure to follow me on Instagram. And if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal, make sure to visit carhelpcan.com. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.